You know, most cops will take the day off after the night you had.
You're still getting to know me.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I've watched the first 7 episodes and I am just so gripped. I love the way that this stands on its own, but also continues to expand the world that came from the novels. I'd love to hear first and foremost, what was it like finding the right team to really shepherd Renee onto the screen after, yourself sort of co-shepherding Bosch on screen for so many years?
Well, I was lucky because, we had a good run with Bosch. We had on both sides of the camera, amazing people involved. And so when Ballard came up, we knew we could take a lot of these people over. Not only was it with Amazon Prime, but it was also the same production company, Fable. And so there was a bit of a shorthand, which is nice because I can remember 10 years ago when we started Bosch and nobody knew each other and there was a bunch of strangers, and there's a period of time where you wait for stuff to fall into place. This felt like we were all moving on the same plane almost from the very first day, and that made things a lot easier. And I guess, 10 years ago when first season of Bosch, I didn't know anything about TV really, as a book writer. 10 years later, I know a lot more about TV. I'm not saying I'm an expert at it, but I know more than I did 10 years ago, and I could bring that experience to it going forward. So I think it was a good transition, an easier transition. And the results of that end up being what you see on the screen. And I'm glad after 7 episodes that you're into it. I think it's a good show.
Well, and I really can't wait to go back and finish this season because I left off on quite some big notes to finish out. Now, I'd love to hear, much like with Bosch, I feel like this season seems to be mixing elements of a couple different books. And I'd love to hear what it was like working with Kendall and Michael to really determine what were the best books to start with telling, Renee's solo stories, so to speak.
It's an interesting situation. I never dictate anything to anybody. I'm lucky in that Amazon had this philosophy that with Bosch, and they carried over to Ballard, that you got multiple books. We're gonna, most of the time when you make a deal in Hollywood, it's for one book. But Amazon just said, we'll take it all, and that way we can have our creators take what they need, and which I think is almost a unique thing to do in Hollywood. And so Michael and Kendall knew from the beginning that there's a big transition in the Ballard series where she goes from being a detective to running cold cases. Still a detective, but there's that transition. And we wanted the show to center on her running the cold case unit, but there's 4 books before that have some, her backstory, some cases and so forth. So don't just read the cold case, read everything and take what you need. And that's, as you're right, they have chosen to pull a lot of her backstory from one book, but the action or investigative piece is from Desert Star. And then there's stuff that's wholly made up because, the books are one thing and they're pretty much through the eyes of Ballard, but on a TV show, you got to spread the stories out and you got to follow other characters, which I don't do in the books. And so that means the creation of more story that's not drawn from the books. And Michael and Kendall and their crew of writers were really, really ingenious in how they did that.
Well, and it's made for some emotional storytelling so far, which I did want to talk about how they've adapted The Late Show for the modern setting. Not that it wasn't written in a modern setting, but it's now we're in a post-Me Too era looking at this story and how Ballard's interactions with Oliveros has really come to light now. What is it like not only seeing them adapt it in a modern or in a post-Me Too era, but also maybe even conversations you had with them about how they wanted to tackle that?
Yeah, we knew it was an important part because it's like, Ballard is, the mystery is also Ballard, like what makes her tick, what makes her do this, especially when there's these kind of obstacles in front of her in this bureaucracy called the LAPD. We were lucky that Ballard is inspired by a single detective who did this work until she retired recently and then came to work on our show. So we had the kind of the real Renee Ballard, this Mitzi Roberts is her name, right there, so we could go to her as I do when I write the books, I go to her all the time. So did Michael and Kendall, and she was in the writing room and so forth. And that gave us a great advantage in how we approached this. But it wasn't like I had discussions with Michael and Kendall about how to do it. It's more like the front of mind thing is let's try to be as realistic about this world, not just forensics and the steps you take to solve a cold case, but also the bureaucracy and the sociology that's in the LAPD. Let's get that right. And look right here, this person just spent 30 years in that milieu. Let's mine her. Let's ask her questions. Let's get her to tell us what it's really like. And that I think was the amazing part about this journey was that we had that real life Renee Ballard that we could go to and use to capture hopefully the verisimilitude of this whole world.
It really does feel so grounded in how it explores, like you say, the bureaucracy and everything that a real Renee Ballard would have to go through. So I love that you've had that experience with her and that Michael and Kendall got to share on that in the show. Now, one thing I find interesting too about the show is that it feels like a brighter show in a sense, in that I found myself laughing more. I found myself the colors more vibrant in comparison to maybe Bosch. Is that an intentional thing on their part to sort of help make sure it set itself apart from the original show?
Yeah, I mean, the goal wasn't necessarily separate from the original show, but it was more, I think it was to open it to appeal to more people. And, they had that phrase in Hollywood, blue sky. From the beginning, we said we wanted more blue sky. And we thought this was like a perfect character and world to do it because, it's in the books, where she's on the ocean, she finds solace in the ocean. By contrast, Harry Bosch finds solace by looking out at this dark city with lights and so forth. That alone is just a shift towards brightness, And so we were aware of that. We wanted to go to locations. And we also knew the setup where she has to put together this kind of ragtag group of somewhat misfits, that there would be opportunity for humor, anecdotal humor, and personality, which we don't have or didn't have in the Bosch show. So we just from the general makeup of what we were doing, we knew we could grow a show that was wider. I keep using that word wider. I think what I mean by that is a wider appeal to viewers, and I think we captured that.
I couldn't agree more. As much as I loved Harry and his group or his partner's dynamic, I did love the team dynamic in this series so far. And I can't wait to hopefully see that grow in future seasons. I see him coming close to time. So obviously one thing I did want to ask was, Harry does come back, pops up at one point in this show. What was that conversation like, making sure that you were still able to find a way to include him without making it feel like you were oversaturating him and taking away from it being Renee's story?
Yeah, that's quite the balancing act, because this is Renee's story, and Maggie Q's the face of this show. But we also knew we had this audience with Harry Bosch, and why not do what we can, use him kind of as our ambassador to this new show. And I think we use him sparingly. Maybe some fans will want to see him more. But he's in there enough that you see their connection between Ballard and Bosch. A little bit fraught at times, but at the end, very respectful. They want each other to succeed. They just go about succeeding in different ways. And So that alone is, I think, an interesting relationship to drop into the bigger picture here.
I mean, I even think of the lunch scene in episode 2 between the two of them, and how that contrast, but yet that respect is felt. I do love seeing those two together. Now, last question before I let you go. I mean, Bosch ran for many seasons. You obviously have many Renee books. How's the future of Ballard looking? Are there already talks and ideas getting into place for a second season?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a green light yet. We're going to see how the show does. I mean, we're very confident that the show is going to do well. Because if you've seen it, you kind of know that it's going to appeal to people. So hopefully we'll get a second season, and then we'll be off. And hopefully, I mean, I think what happened with Bosch is pretty rare. And I can still remember on the first day of filming Bosch, like I did an interview for like Instagram or something, where I asked Titus if he could stick around for 5 seasons, and he said, yeah, but we got twice that. So we'll see what happens. I think the show does have legs. I think there's a lot of stories we can tell with Renee and with Maggie, and so hopefully we get a chance to do that.
Well, I'm going to get the word out there for that show so that we can get you those future stories. And I'm still keeping my fingers crossed that you and Titus can find a way to give Harry a final farewell, because I already miss him. But Michael, thank you so much for taking the time. I truly do appreciate it.